Well, this week let's talk a little bit more about Russia. Of course, we know that communism is dead in Russia because the New York Times and others have told us to believe that. But we see a reconsolidation of control within the Russian government by Putin, who was a KGB secret police enforcer. And he behaves that way just about with everyone and everything today. Oh, he has this macho image of riding a horse and getting out on the mat and doing a little kung fu and all the rest of it, but you don't see the guy out there on the mat with him really trying to beat Putin up. I don't think it works that way. Well, what we see now is the play, if you will, of Russia under Putin to start doing a little kung fu on Europe. We have mentioned in the past the fact that a lot of Russian natural gas and gasoline goes into Europe, Central Europe and Western Europe. And they have used that under Putin to control the politics of such nations as Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. But there's been foreign money invested in bringing up the Russian oil fields and the Russian refineries into the modern age, if you will, to enable them to be able to do these things. Now what we see is that the biggest millionaire in Russia that had that was involved in this new non-communist economy has been put in the gulag. He's been sent off to Siberia to rot. He'll never probably get out of there in his lifetime. Why? Because he was the richest man. And he became a competitor to Putin. And that's a no-no in Russia today. If you're a journalist and you have anything to say nasty about Putin, you're shot in your car or your apartment, that sort of thing. It goes on frequently enough to set a pattern. Now what we see is that as a result of the screws being tightened on the domestic people that are the new millionaires in Russia, that BP, the oil company, has decided that they're going to sell to the Russian government in turn for stock in the company they used to own. And so Russia now has complete control over the oil industry in its own country, the government. You can put a name, any name you want to put on it, but it will be a Russian government entity controlled by Putin. We see at the same time that the Russians have just had a nuclear missile test. You did not read about it in your domestic newspaper or the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or USA Today or any of the rest of them. But we are told that Putin himself was as commander-in-chief, personally oversaw this test, which was very successful in launching a couple of missiles to see if they work, to be able to deliver nuclear warheads wherever they want to drop them in and say hello. The thing about it is that we see this more and more, and this propaganda within Russia, but not necessarily carried in the Western press, where Putin is the strong man. He is our commander-in-chief. He is the ruler. And pretty soon you're going to start seeing balloons float his picture up above Red Square like they did with Stalin and everything else. And none of this is getting into the Western, no, not none of it, but much of it is not getting into the Western press. So we see this buildup of the military in Russia and China and everything else. And you have to ask yourself a question. Who in the world is planning on invading Russia? Anybody out there? Hold up your hand. Would you please tell me who it is? Who is out there waiting to invade China? So why are they arming themselves to the teeth, both Russia and China? Why is it that they're doing these things and pushing the Filipinos and the Japanese off of islands in the Pacific as far as the Chinese are concerned? Why is it that the Russians are going in and having surrogate nations like Iran and now Iraq? Now what we see is that Iraq is coming more and more in line into the Moscow orbit. We give foreign aid to Iraq. We just went in there and got rid of a dictator that somehow wanted to play the game by himself. And I don't like any dictator, let alone an independent dictator or part of a coterie. It doesn't matter. He's a dictator. But now that we've helped Iraq and we're going to be sending them F-16s, but they are more and more tied at the hip with Iran and also Moscow, this does not look good. You know, a lot of secret data goes along with the weaponry that we supply. If we are going to supply F-16s, we just don't give them the shell. This is the airframe and you stick an engine in it. You also give them the aeronautics. You give them the things that they need to know in order to fight and carry out a mission with that airplane. During Vietnam, we did not get back the backseaters, the guys that were behind the pilot, who were running the avionics during the Vietnam War. Those men had information that was needed in Moscow and Beijing, and they weren't kept with the other POWs. They were shipped to Moscow and Beijing. They didn't come home from Vietnam. But now, we're sending them the whole package through surrogate nations. And speaking of that, Russia is starting to arm Venezuela with the latest in Yak airplanes. So Venezuela is worried about being invaded too. By whom? Certainly I don't know of any nation that has any plans to do so. The communist countries are arming themselves to the teeth. Why? At the same time, by the way, just for your own information, in the New York Times yesterday, the Sunday edition, if you went to the first page, first section of the Sunday edition and open it up to the center spread, lo and behold, for the first time that I know of, China now has a two-page spread on advertising to invest in China. Now, I've shown you single page spreads in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, but now it's centerfold, double page, because China's in trouble economically, and they're trying to entice more business into China while they build aircraft carriers, airplanes, artillery, missiles, so on and so forth. Isn't it interesting that we'll get all shook up in the standard press over a rinky-dink missile test out of North Korea, but when they have a massive missile test out of the Soviet Union, if you will, you don't hear a word about it in the Western press. I find that very interesting. At any rate, the bear is on the rise, and the tiger as well, and we're sitting back and concerning ourselves with Libya and Yemen and Lebanon, etc. In every case, these individuals seem to turn out in the orbit of our enemies after we leave. There's a plan. Things do not happen unless people want them to happen. People make things happen. These things are not by happenstance. They are done on purpose. And it's time to wake up and find out what's really going on. Until next week, we'll see you then.